For as long as Maya Williams could remember, success in her family had always come with a price tag. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Bethesda, Maryland, she and her older sister Natasha were raised in a household where achievement was measured not by character, kindness, or purpose, but by prestige, income, and social status. Their parents, Robert and Diana Williams, were respected corporate executives who believed that the ultimate goal in life was to climb the ladder of success, earn an impressive title, and surround yourself with symbols of wealth. To them, appearances mattered almost as much as reality. From an early age, Natasha seemed perfectly suited to that world. She excelled in school, won academic awards, attended elite summer programs, and carried herself with a confidence that impressed everyone around her. Family friends often referred to her as the future CEO, and their parents proudly displayed every certificate and trophy she brought home. Natasha thrived under the spotlight. She understood exactly what her parents wanted and spent her life delivering it. Maya, on the other hand, was different. She was quieter, more reflective, and far more interested in people than prestige. While Natasha dreamed of boardrooms and executive offices, Maya spent her afternoons volunteering at community centers, tutoring younger students, and listening to the stories of people whose lives looked nothing like her own. She found fulfillment in helping others, but in her family's eyes, compassion was not a valuable currency. As the years passed, the comparisons became impossible to ignore. Every report card turned into a competition. Every family gathering became another opportunity for Natasha's accomplishments to be celebrated, while Maya's interests were quietly dismissed. If Natasha received an A+, everyone applauded. If Maya earned the same grade, the conversation quickly shifted back to her sister. The message was subtle at first, but over time it became painfully clear. Natasha was the daughter who made the family proud, and Maya was simply expected to keep up. The divide widened when it came time for college. Natasha was accepted into prestigious universities and eventually chose Princeton, a decision that became a source of endless pride for her parents. Maya earned a partial scholarship to the University of Virginia, a respected school by any standard but not prestigious enough for the Williams family. Instead of congratulating her, her father focused on what she had failed to achieve. Princeton would have opened more doors, he remarked during dinner one evening. You should have aimed higher, her mother added. Maya smiled politely and remained silent, but the disappointment in their voices lingered long after the conversation ended. The real conflict began when Maya chose her career path. While Natasha pursued business and later earned an MBA, Maya decided to study social work. The announcement landed like a bombshell at the family dinner table. Social work, her father repeated in disbelief. You're telling me you're spending 4 years in college to become a social worker? I want to help underserved communities, Maya explained. Her mother exchanged a glance with her father. That's very noble, she said, though her tone suggested the exact opposite. But how are you planning to make a living? The criticism only intensified after graduation. While Natasha entered the corporate world with an impressive salary and clear career trajectory, Maya accepted a position at a small nonprofit organization, helping low-income students gain access to educational opportunities. Her starting salary barely reached $30,000 a year. Her father couldn't understand it. When are you going to get a real job? He asked repeatedly. This is a real job, Maya would reply. No, he said bluntly. Real jobs pay enough to support a future. Every conversation seemed to end the same way. No matter how hard she worked or how passionate she felt about her mission, her parents reduced her efforts to a hobby, a phase, or a mistake she would eventually outgrow. Family gatherings became increasingly painful. Relatives would ask Natasha about promotions, investments, and business opportunities. Meanwhile, Maya received polite smiles and dismissive questions. So are you still doing that charity work? Do you think you'll ever move into something more serious? How much do jobs like that even pay? No one ever asked how many lives she had helped change. No one asked about the students she mentored or the families she supported. They only cared about titles and paychecks. The loneliness became one of the hardest parts of Maya's journey. She wasn't angry that Natasha was successful. In fact, she admired her sister's intelligence and determination. What hurt was knowing that the people who should have known her best never bothered to understand who she really was. They judged her choices without asking why she made them. They dismissed her work without learning what she actually did. Over time, Maya stopped trying to explain herself. She learned to smile through the criticism, nod through the comparisons, and quietly carry the weight of being labeled the disappointment of the family. Every holiday dinner, every birthday celebration, and every gathering reinforced the same painful narrative. Natasha was the success story and Maya was the cautionary tale. Yet beneath the surface, something remarkable was happening. While her family obsessed over appearances, Maya was building something meaningful. While they measured success in dollars and status symbols, she was changing lives one student at a time. They couldn't see it because they never looked closely enough. To them, Maya Williams was the daughter who had wasted her potential. But the truth was far different. And one day that truth would change everything. What Maya's family never understood was that while they were busy measuring success by salaries, luxury cars, and corporate titles, she was quietly building something far more powerful. Every criticism they threw at her only strengthened her resolve. Every dismissive comment became fuel. While they assumed she was struggling at the bottom of a small nonprofit organization, Maya was laying the foundation for what would eventually become one of the largest and most impactful educational nonprofits in the United States. Her journey began in a cramped office tucked away in an aging brick building on the edge of Washington, D.C. The nonprofit she joined after graduation had fewer than 10 employees and operated on a budget so small that every expense required careful consideration. The furniture was secondhand, the computers were outdated, and there were days when the organization wasn't sure how it would cover next month's operating costs. Maya's annual salary barely exceeded $30,000. And after paying rent, student loans, and basic living expenses, there was very little left. Yet she loved every minute of it. Unlike the corporate world her parents admired, Maya could see the direct impact of her work. Every student she helped represented a real life, a real future, and a real opportunity to change someone's trajectory forever. She spent countless hours meeting families, visiting schools, and listening to the challenges facing students from underserved communities. The more she learned, the more she realized how deeply educational inequality affected millions of children across the country. Many of the students she worked with were just as intelligent as their wealthier peers. The difference wasn't talent, it was opportunity. One of her earliest success stories was a young girl named Maria. Raised in a small rural town in Virginia, Maria dreamed of becoming a doctor. Her grades were exceptional, but her school lacked advanced placement courses, college counseling services, and scholarship guidance. Her mother worked long hours cleaning offices, and her father struggled to support the family through seasonal construction jobs. College seemed impossible. Maya refused to let that happen. She personally connected Maria with academic mentors, helped her prepare scholarship applications, and arranged transportation so she could attend college preparation workshops. Years later, Maria would earn a medical degree and return to serve underserved communities, similar to the one where she grew up. Then there was David, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Despite his incredible academic potential, he had never taken an SAT preparation course because his family simply couldn't afford one. Maya helped secure free tutoring resources, guided him through the admissions process, and connected him with financial aid opportunities. Eventually, David was accepted into MIT, becoming the first member of his family to attend college. Stories like these became the driving force behind Maya's mission. As results began to accumulate, people inside the organization started noticing her exceptional abilities. She wasn't just passionate, she was strategic. She understood how to build systems, improve programs, and maximize limited resources. Within just a few years, she redesigned several educational initiatives, improved student outcomes, and secured multiple grants that significantly increased the organization's reach. At only 27 years old, Maya was promoted to Director of Programs. The promotion came with greater responsibility but also greater challenges. She now managed teams, coordinated partnerships, and oversaw projects impacting thousands of students. Many older professionals questioned whether someone so young was ready for leadership. Maya answered every doubt with results. Student enrollment doubled. Graduation rates improved. New funding sources emerged. The organization expanded faster than anyone expected. By the time she turned 30, the board appointed her executive director. For most people, that achievement alone would have represented the pinnacle of a successful career. For Maya, it was only the beginning. As she traveled across the country, she discovered that countless small educational nonprofits faced the same challenges. They shared similar missions, served similar communities, and struggled with the same financial limitations. Many organizations competed for the same grants and donors despite pursuing nearly identical goals. Maya saw an opportunity. Instead of allowing these nonprofits to fight over limited resources, she proposed something radical, merging multiple organizations into a single national entity capable of creating far greater impact. The idea was controversial. Some leaders feared losing their independence. Others worried about changes in leadership. Many believed the logistics were impossible. Critics called the plan unrealistic. Some called it reckless. Others predicted complete failure. Funding was uncertain. Staffing shortages were constant. Administrative costs threatened to overwhelm the project before it even began. Several major donors refused to support the merger, convinced it would collapse under its own complexity. But Maya refused to back down. For nearly 2 years, she traveled relentlessly, meeting with board members, donors, educators, community leaders, and nonprofit executives. She spent thousands of hours negotiating agreements, building trust, and convincing people that a larger vision was possible. Slowly, momentum began to grow. One organization agreed to join, then another, then a third. What emerged from those efforts was Bright Futures Initiative. The new organization was built on a simple but powerful belief: every student deserves access to educational opportunities regardless of where they were born, how much money their parents earned, or what zip code they lived in. The early years were far from easy. Funding gaps created constant stress. Recruiting qualified staff proved difficult. Technology systems needed complete overhauls. National expansion required enormous coordination. There were moments when Maya wondered if the critics had been right. Yet every obstacle strengthened the organization. Every challenge forced innovation. Every setback produced new solutions. Under Maya's leadership, Bright Futures grew at an extraordinary pace. Partnerships with universities expanded across the country. Scholarship programs multiplied. Corporate sponsors joined the mission. Foundations began taking notice. Educational experts praised the organization's measurable results. Within a decade, Bright Futures Initiative operated programs in 43 states. More than 200 employees worked across multiple departments. Partnerships with 15 universities created life-changing opportunities for students who previously had none. Most importantly, over 500,000 students received educational support, mentorship, scholarships, technology resources, and college preparation assistance. The organization's annual operating budget eventually reached an astonishing $820 million. What made the achievement even more remarkable was Maya's refusal to change. While many executives earning similar salaries embraced luxury lifestyles, Maya remained grounded. She still drove an aging Subaru. She still lived modestly. She still spent more time discussing student outcomes than financial reports. To her, the money was never the goal. It was simply a tool for creating greater impact. Ironically, the bigger Bright Futures became the less her family knew about it. At family dinners, conversations still revolved around Natasha's social status, expensive vacations, and influential connections. Nobody asked Maya about the students she helped. Nobody asked about the hundreds of millions of dollars she managed. Nobody asked about the organization transforming educational access across America. They simply assumed she was still the struggling social worker they had always imagined. And so Maya remained silent. Not because she lacked confidence, not because she was ashamed, but because she had long ago realized that people who judge success only by appearances rarely recognize greatness when it stands directly in front of them. While her parents worried about titles, she was changing lives. While they admired wealth, she was creating opportunity. While they celebrated status, she was building a legacy. And the most astonishing part of all was that her family had absolutely no idea who they were looking down on. If Maya's journey was defined by purpose, perseverance, and quiet determination, Natasha's life had become increasingly defined by something very different: status. What had started as ambition gradually evolved into obsession. Somewhere along the way, Natasha stopped caring about who she was and became consumed by how she appeared to others. The transformation accelerated after her divorce from Derek. For years, Natasha had built her identity around being the successful daughter. She had attended elite schools, secured prestigious jobs, and married a rising financial executive. From the outside, her life looked perfect. But when her marriage collapsed, so did much of the identity she had spent years constructing. The divorce left her humiliated and uncertain. For the first time in her life, she no longer felt superior. Then she met Stephen Whitmore. Stephen was everything Natasha believed she needed. Handsome, successful, and effortlessly connected, he came from a family whose wealth stretched back generations. Unlike the self-made executives Natasha admired growing up, the Whitmores belonged to an entirely different world. They didn't merely have money, they had influence. Their family name opened doors that most people never even knew existed. The Whitmores owned multiple estates, traveled by private jet, maintained memberships at exclusive clubs, and moved comfortably among senators, CEOs, philanthropists, and powerful investors. Their family foundation controlled billions of dollars in assets and funded major initiatives across education, healthcare, and public policy. To Natasha, it was intoxicating. When Steven proposed, she didn't simply see a husband. She saw an upgrade. Almost overnight, she began introducing herself differently. She spoke less about her own accomplishments and more about Steven's family. Every conversation somehow returned to the Whitmore name. At family dinners, she would casually mention private dinners with politicians. At holiday gatherings, she would discuss charity galas attended by celebrities. On social media, she posted endless photos from luxury resorts, black tie events, and exclusive fundraisers. The captions were always carefully crafted. Honored to support meaningful change. Grateful to be surrounded by visionaries. Proud to be part of something bigger. But Maya noticed something troubling. Natasha rarely talked about the causes themselves. She talked about the people. The prestige. The access. The attention. It wasn't philanthropy she loved. It was proximity to power. The more Natasha immersed herself in her new world, the more arrogant she became. Her conversations with Maya grew increasingly patronizing. Every achievement was measured in dollars. Every relationship was evaluated according to status. One afternoon, Natasha called Maya after attending a fundraising gala. "You should have seen the guest list," she said excitedly. "Sounds like a nice event." "Nice," Natasha laughed. "Maya, there were billionaires there. Actual billionaires. People who control entire industries. I'm happy you had fun. You don't get it. These are people who matter." The comment lingered in Maya's mind long after the call ended. People who matter. As if everyone else somehow mattered less. Over time, Natasha became openly dismissive of Maya's career. Whenever someone asked about her younger sister, Natasha would smile politely and say things like, "Oh, Maya works for a nonprofit." Or, "She's always been more interested in volunteering than business." Or worse, "She means well." The phrase irritated Maya every time she heard it. She means well. As if 15 years of dedication, leadership, and impact could be reduced to a cute personality trait. Yet Maya rarely defended herself. She had learned that Natasha wasn't really talking about her. She was talking about her own insecurities. The breaking point came a few weeks before Christmas. Maya was sitting in her townhouse finishing reports when her phone rang. "Natasha." The conversation began normally. "We're hosting Christmas at the Whitmore estate this year," Natasha announced. "That sounds wonderful." "It is. Steven's parents are inviting everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody." A long silence followed. Then Natasha spoke again. "Actually, that's what I need to talk to you about." Something in her voice immediately made Maya uneasy. "What about it?" Another pause. "Maya, I don't think you should come." For a moment, Maya thought she had misheard. "What?" "I've been thinking about this for weeks." "Thinking about what?" "About how awkward it's going to be." Maya sat perfectly still. "Awkward for who?" "For everyone." The words landed like a punch. Natasha continued before Maya could respond. "Steven's family is different. They operate at a certain level. They're used to being around successful people." Successful people. There it was again. And Maya asked quietly, "And you're not exactly going to fit in?" The silence that followed felt endless. Maya stared out the window, unable to believe what she was hearing. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want things to become uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable how?" "Maya, don't make me spell it out." "No. Spell it out." Natasha exhaled heavily. "You're a social worker." "I run a nonprofit." "Same difference." Maya felt her chest tighten. "You drive an old Subaru." "So? You live in a modest townhouse." "Your point?" "My point is that Steven's family is used to a certain level of achievement." The words dripped with condescension. For years, Natasha had implied these things. Now she was finally saying them aloud. "You think I'm not successful?" Natasha hesitated. "I think you've settled." The statement cut deeper than Maya expected. Not because it was true, but because it revealed exactly how little her sister understood her. Everything Maya had built, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had accomplished, none of it mattered to Natasha, because it didn't look impressive enough. "I don't want you embarrassing me," Natasha finally admitted. There it was. The truth. Raw, ugly, unfiltered. Maya closed her eyes. "Embarrassing you. Steven's parents are important people. And I'm not." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes. Each sentence hurt more than the one before. Natasha spoke endlessly about reputation, perception, success, and appearances. Not once did she ask how Maya felt. Not once did she consider how cruel she sounded. By the time the call ended, Maya felt something inside her quietly break. 2 days later, her father called. For a brief moment, Maya hoped he might defend her. She should have known better. Your sister told me about Christmas. Did she? She's trying to do what's best. Maya laughed bitterly. Is she? You need to understand the position she's in. The position she's in. The Whitmores are influential people. And perception matters. Maya closed her eyes. Not him too. Maya, you've chosen a very different path. Meaning, your nonprofit work isn't exactly the kind of thing people like the Whitmores understand. The words made her stomach turn. My nonprofit work. Yes. The work helping hundreds of thousands of students. He ignored the question. They donate to universities and major institutions. And they may not appreciate smaller efforts. Smaller efforts. The phrase hit harder than Natasha's insults. Because it came from her father, the man who had never once asked what she actually did. The man who had spent 15 years dismissing her career. The man who had no idea who his daughter truly was. Maya, he continued, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is step aside. Step aside. Let the successful family members shine. Let Natasha have her moment. Let appearances remain intact. Let the illusion survive. When the call ended, Maya sat alone in silence. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy. What she felt instead was disappointment. Deep, exhausting disappointment. For years, she had tolerated the comparisons, the criticism, the assumptions, the disrespect. But this was different. Her own family had decided she was so embarrassing that she shouldn't even attend Christmas. Not because of anything she had done. Not because of who she was. But because they believed she wasn't successful enough to stand beside them. And as Maya stared at the dark screen of her phone, one painful thought echoed through her mind. None of them had any idea who they were talking about. None of them knew the organization she had built. None of them knew the lives she had changed. None of them knew the impact she was having across the country. They were judging a woman they had never bothered to understand. And soon, whether they liked it or not, the truth was going to come out. When it did, everything they believed about success would be shattered forever. For days after the phone calls with Natasha and her father, Maya tried to convince herself that being excluded from Christmas didn't matter. She buried herself in work, attended meetings, reviewed scholarship proposals, and focused on the thousands of students who depended on bright futures. But no matter how busy she stayed, the words kept returning. You'll embarrass the family. Let the successful members shine. Your little nonprofit. 15 years of being underestimated had prepared her for criticism. What she wasn't prepared for was the realization that her own family genuinely believed she had failed at life. Then something unexpected happened. 3 days before Christmas, Maya decided to make a phone call. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't looking to expose anyone. She simply believed Richard Blackstone deserved to know the truth. When his assistant transferred the call, Richard greeted her warmly. Maya, Merry Christmas. How are preparations for the scholarship expansion going? They're moving ahead smoothly. Excellent. I reviewed the latest projections yesterday. Remarkable work as always. For a moment, Maya almost changed her mind. Then she took a breath. Richard, there's something personal I should probably tell you. His tone immediately shifted. Of course. My sister is Natasha Whitmore. Silence. The kind of silence that only happens when someone is trying to process something completely unexpected. Natasha Whitmore, Richard repeated slowly. Stephen Whitmore's wife. Another pause. Then a quiet laugh. Well, that certainly explains a few things. What things? I always thought you looked familiar when Stephen showed us wedding photos. Maya smiled faintly. I never mentioned it because I didn't think it mattered. And now it does. Richard listened carefully as Maya explained everything. The assumptions, the comparisons, the insults, the Christmas invitation that had suddenly become a disinvitation. By the time she finished speaking, Richard was unusually quiet. Finally, he said something that caught her completely off guard. Maya, would you do Patricia and me a favor? What? Come to Christmas dinner. Maya laughed softly. I don't think your daughter-in-law would appreciate that. Perhaps not. I'm serious, Richard. Suawai. His voice became firm. The woman responsible for one of the most impactful educational organizations in America deserves a seat at my table. I don't want to create drama. You wouldn't be creating drama. He paused. You'd simply be bringing truth into the room. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt something close to peace. After a long conversation, she accepted. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. The Blackstone estate looked like something from a holiday film. Located on sprawling private grounds outside Washington, the property was breathtaking. Thousands of white lights wrapped around ancient trees. Fresh snow covered the gardens. Elegant wreaths decorated every window. Through the glass, warm golden light spilled into the night. Luxury was everywhere. But unlike the flashy wealth Natasha admired, this felt understated. Confident. Established. The kind of wealth that didn't need to prove itself. A valet greeted Maya as she stepped out of her aging Subaru. She smiled at the irony. The same car Natasha considered embarrassing was parked among Bentleys, Mercedes, and Range Rovers. Inside, the estate buzzed with quiet conversation. Guests gathered around fireplaces. Champagne glasses clinked softly. Christmas music played in the background. The scent of pine, cinnamon, and roasted food filled the air. For a brief moment, Maya wondered if she had made a mistake. Then she heard a familiar voice. Maya. She turned. Natasha stood frozen near the fireplace. The color drained from her face instantly. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Then panic took over. What are you doing here? The room seemed to shrink around them. Maya remained calm. I was invited. No. Natasha shook her head rapidly. No, that's impossible. It isn't. Who invited you? Before Maya could answer, another voice entered the conversation. I did? Richard Blackstone stepped forward. Everything changed. Natasha's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Richard placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. I'm delighted you could join us. The room grew noticeably quieter. Guests turned to watch. Natasha forced a nervous laugh. Mr. Blackstone, I think there's been some misunderstanding. There hasn't. Richard's voice remained calm. I specifically asked Maya to attend. But why? The question escaped before Natasha could stop herself. Richard looked genuinely surprised. Because she's one of the most impressive people I know. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya saw Stephen look up. Her parents froze. Several guests exchanged curious glances. Natasha stared at Richard. What do you mean? Richard blinked. You know what I mean. No, I don't. For the first time all evening, confusion appeared on his face. You don't know about your sister's work. The question landed like a grenade. Everyone was listening now. Maya could practically feel the tension spreading through the room. My sister works for a nonprofit, Natasha said carefully. Richard laughed. That's one way to describe it. The room fell completely silent. Then Richard turned toward the guests. Allow me to introduce Maya Williams. He smiled proudly. Executive Director of Bright Futures Initiative. Several people immediately reacted. The name was recognizable. Not to everyone, but to enough people. One man near the bar actually gasped. Bright Futures. Another guest looked shocked. The education organization. Richard nodded. The very same. Natasha stared at Maya. Her expression slowly shifted from confusion to disbelief. No. Maya remained silent. No, Natasha repeated. That's impossible. It isn't. Richard continued. Bright Futures currently operates in 43 states. The room became even quieter. Over 500,000 students have benefited from its programs. Several guests exchanged impressed looks. Richard wasn't finished. The organization manages an annual budget exceeding $820 million. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand. The sound echoed through the room. Natasha looked physically ill. Her father appeared frozen. Her mother covered her mouth. Richard continued speaking. For 4 years, the Blackstone Foundation has partnered with Bright Futures. He smiled toward Maya. In fact, we consider it our highest impact investment. Then came the number that changed everything. Our foundation has contributed $73 million to support Maya's vision. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire room seemed unable to process what they had just heard. Natasha looked at Maya as though she were seeing her for the first time. Her father's face had turned white. Her mother appeared close to tears. Stephen simply stared. Finally, Natasha found her voice. Why didn't you tell us? Maya looked at her calmly. When would I have told you? The question hit harder than any accusation. Nobody had an answer. Not Natasha. Not her parents. Nobody. Because the truth was obvious. They had never asked. Dinner was announced shortly afterward. Yet the atmosphere had completely changed. The woman who had arrived as the embarrassing sister was now the most respected person in the room. Richard intentionally seated Maya near the head of the table. Throughout the evening, he repeatedly asked her questions. Not superficial questions. Important ones. Questions that revealed the scale of her leadership. What is your long-term strategy for expanding educational access? How will the scholarship initiative scale nationally? What barriers still prevent students from reaching college? Each answer demonstrated her intelligence, vision, and expertise. She spoke about educational inequality. She explained data-driven interventions. She outlined partnerships with universities. She discussed mentoring systems, scholarship programs, and measurable outcomes. Every response commanded attention. Every answer increased the room's admiration. Meanwhile, Natasha sat in silence. The contrast was impossible to ignore. For years, she had built her identity around borrowed prestige. Now everyone could see the difference between inherited status and earned accomplishment. Eventually, Natasha asked Maya to speak privately. The moment they entered the study, years of resentment exploded. How could you do this to me? Maya stared at her. Do what? Humiliate me. You did that yourself. The words cut deep because they were true. For the first time, Natasha stopped pretending. The mask cracked. Then shattered completely. Tears filled her eyes. She admitted how lost she felt after her first marriage failed. How desperately she needed to feel important again. How marrying into the Blackstone family became a substitute for building an identity of her own. Most painfully of all, she admitted something Maya never expected to hear. I needed you to be the failure. The confession hung in the air. If you succeeded, Natasha whispered, then what did that make me? For years, she had convinced herself she was winning. The better schools, the bigger salary, the wealthier husband, the more prestigious life. Yet sitting across from Maya, she realized something devastating. She had spent years chasing the appearance of success, while Maya had spent those same years creating actual impact. The realization broke her. And for the first time in her life, Natasha had no title, no social status, and no family name to hide behind. Only the truth. Back in the dining room, apologies followed. Regrets surfaced. Masks disappeared. And as Richard raised a glass to Maya's achievements, the room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Genuine applause. The kind earned through years of sacrifice and dedication. As Maya looked around the table, she saw disbelief in her parents' eyes. Shame in Natasha's. Respect in the guests. Pride in Richard's. For 15 years, she had been invisible. For 15 years, she had been treated like the family disappointment. And now, finally, everyone saw what had been there all along. Not a failure. Not an embarrassment. Not a woman who had settled. But a leader. A builder. A visionary. A woman who had changed hundreds of thousands of lives while the people closest to her never bothered to notice. At that moment, justice didn't feel loud. It didn't feel vengeful. It felt simple. The truth had finally entered the room. And once the truth arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The Christmas dinner at the Blackstone estate did more than reveal the truth about Maya's accomplishments. It forced everyone in the room to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. For years, they had measured success through a narrow lens: wealth, titles, social status, and appearances. One evening shattered those assumptions forever. The person most affected by that realization was Natasha. For weeks after Christmas, she struggled to process everything that had happened. The image she had carefully constructed over the years had collapsed in a matter of hours. For the first time, she was forced to acknowledge that she had spent much of her adult life chasing validation instead of purpose. To her credit, Natasha didn't run from that realization. Instead, she decided to do something she never imagined she would do. She asked Maya if she could volunteer at Bright Futures. At first, Maya was skeptical. Volunteering wasn't another social event or networking opportunity. It wasn't a gala where people posed for photographs and discussed charitable causes over expensive dinners. It was real work, difficult work, emotional work. But Natasha insisted. So Maya gave her a chance. The adjustment was not easy. On her first day, Natasha found herself sitting across from students whose lives looked nothing like her own. Many came from neighborhoods where violence, poverty, and instability were everyday realities. Some worked part-time jobs after school to help support their families. Others were caring for younger siblings while their parents worked multiple jobs. The challenges these students faced were things Natasha had never truly understood. One afternoon, she met a 17-year-old girl named Maria. Maria shared her college essay during a mentoring session. In it, she wrote about losing her mother to cancer, helping raise her younger siblings, and trying to maintain excellent grades while working evenings at a grocery store. When Maria finished reading, she apologized. "I'm sorry if it's too depressing," she said quietly. The words hit Natasha harder than she expected. Too depressing? This young girl had endured more hardship before adulthood than Natasha had faced in her entire life, yet she was worried about making someone uncomfortable. For several minutes, Natasha couldn't speak. Eventually, tears filled her eyes. "Maria," she finally said, "that is one of the most powerful things I've ever read." The experience changed her. And it wasn't the only one. Week after week, she met students whose determination inspired her. Students who faced obstacles she could barely imagine but refused to give up on their dreams. Slowly, her priorities began to shift. The designer clothes mattered less. The social events mattered less. The opinions of strangers mattered less. For the first time in years, Natasha felt connected to something meaningful. Meanwhile, Maya's parents were going through a transformation of their own. Several months after Christmas, they visited Bright Futures for the first time. As Maya guided them through classrooms, mentorship programs, scholarship workshops, and student support centers, they witnessed something they had never bothered to see before. Impact. Not theoretical impact. Not numbers on a spreadsheet. Real impact. They met students whose lives had been changed by the organization Maya built. A young man preparing to attend Harvard as the first college student in his family. A future engineer who had nearly dropped out of school before receiving mentorship support. A scholarship recipient who would soon become a doctor. Every story revealed another life transformed through opportunities Maya had helped create. At one point, her father stood silently in the middle of a crowded learning center watching dozens of students participate in a college preparation workshop. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he turned to Maya. "I had no idea." The words carried years of regret. He wasn't talking about the size of the organization. He wasn't talking about the budget. He was talking about the impact. For the first time, he understood what his daughter had devoted her life to building. And for the first time, he understood how wrong he had been. As Bright Futures continued growing, another extraordinary opportunity emerged. True to their word, Richard and Patricia Blackstone expanded their commitment to the organization. What began as a partnership worth $73 million evolved into something far greater. The Blackstone Foundation announced a new funding commitment totaling $250 million over 5 years. The investment would allow Bright Futures to expand into all 50 states, triple its scholarship programs, and reach millions of additional students. The announcement made national headlines. But Maya cared less about the publicity than the possibilities. She thought about every student who would now receive opportunities previously out of reach. Every scholarship, every mentor, every future transformed. That was what mattered. Not recognition, not prestige, impact. 1 year after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, the family gathered again for the holidays. This time they met at Maya's home. The atmosphere felt completely different. There were no comparisons. No discussions about who earned more money. No attempts to rank success. Instead, they talked. Really talked. Her parents asked questions about the students she worked with. Natasha shared stories from her volunteer experiences. Stephen spoke proudly about the changes he had seen in his wife. For the first time in years, everyone seemed comfortable simply being themselves. At dinner, Maya's father raised his glass. The room fell quiet. "I spent most of my life believing success could be measured by a paycheck, a title, or a prestigious address," he said. "I was wrong." His voice trembled slightly. "Maya taught me that success is measured by the lives we improve, the opportunities we create, and the difference we make in the world." No one spoke. They simply listened. Then Natasha smiled. "And she taught me that borrowing someone else's success is never as fulfilling as building something meaningful yourself." Everyone laughed softly. But there was truth behind the words. As the evening continued, Maya looked around the table and realized how much had changed. Her parents no longer saw her as the family disappointment. Natasha no longer viewed life as a competition. The family no longer measured worth through appearances. The lesson had taken years to learn, but they finally understood it. Success is not about money. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot create purpose. Success is not about status. Status may attract attention, but it cannot create fulfillment. Success is not about appearances. Appearances impress strangers, but they rarely change lives. True success is about impact. It is about using your abilities to make the world better than you found it. It is about helping others rise. It is about creating opportunities where none existed before. It is about changing lives. That had always been Maya's definition of success. The difference was that now finally her family understood it too. As the night came to an end and everyone prepared to leave, Maya stood by the window watching the people she loved walk out into the cold winter air. A year earlier, she had been the woman excluded from Christmas because she wasn't considered successful enough. Now she was surrounded by people who finally saw her for who she truly was. Not because she had proven them wrong, but because she had never needed their approval to be right. She had been successful all along. They simply hadn't known how to recognize it. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. The most meaningful achievements are often the ones that cannot be measured by money, status, or applause, but by the countless lives made better because someone chose to care. The end.